Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I hope this video finds you well wherever you are in the world. So continuing with my discussion of the Criterion Collection releases for 2020, if you don't mind, I'd like to share with you just some general thoughts and comments that I have with respect to a film that was released by the Criterion Collection under spine number 1014. The film is from 2018. The filmmaker is Alfonso Cuarón. The film is called Roma. So my friends, this is the very recent film, the Alfonso Cuarón film Roma. This is the Netflix film, and so this is a release that is very significant on many respects. Not only is this one of the most celebrated films by Cuarón, and also one of the most celebrated films of the last 5 years or so. It's also a Netflix film that is released by the Criterion Collection, and that is released on a physical media Blu-ray release, what we have here. This is, of course, very significant, and it's also perhaps an indication of the kinds of presentation that we might come to expect from Criterion and how it will release other Netflix films in the future. And if that's the case, my friends, I think we are in for a really great 2020 indeed, because one of the great strengths of this particular release is its presentation as a physical media Blu-ray or physical media presentation from the Criterion Collection. I'll get to those details later in this video, but just to say right now, this is one of the strongest releases from the Criterion Collection ever. And it's a beautiful presentation, a beautiful package of a remarkable cinematic achievement. So this is, on all accounts, I think, one of the best releases by Criterion this year so far. As for the film itself, I think we are dealing with a film that is such a visual and technical marvel, but it also has a very deep emotional resonance that operates, I think, on a very interesting level. Now, what do I mean by this? I don't want to say too much about the plot because I don't want to spoil it. It is essentially a story about capturing a moment in time of a particular aspect of Mexico or Mexico during 1970 and 1971. It is, of course, a story of a family and a housemaid, the main character, Cleo, and her essentially story about how she's relating to the family, how she's relating to her own developments as a human being, how she's relating to the world around her and to the people around her as things are very much changing or very much staying the same, whatever the case may be. But changes are abound and afoot, both on a very small scale, intimate level in terms of family dynamics changing, but also on a grander scale in terms of political upheaval. And this is a film, therefore, that is capturing a kind of moment of what purports to be a feeling or a kind of sense of existence within this particular time period, an almost time capsule-like experience that is creating the backdrop for this very intimate and emotional story about a young woman and her relationships with the family that employs her, and also her relationships with her friends, and what that entails and how that develops and how that runs into certain barriers or impediments along the way towards what must ultimately seen as being a sort of grand finale in terms of how this film resolves itself. This is Roma in a very quick nutshell sort of way of describing it. But to leave it there, I think, would do the film a disservice, because this film is much more than its story. It's a great story, don't get me wrong. It's such a deeply resonant and quite a powerfully moving story with a key performance, Yalitza Aparicio, as the main character here, Cleo. What a stunning, such an earnest, beautiful performance she gives. And this is, I think, her performance also is so emblematic of why I think this film is very interesting. Such a fascinating document. And so how do I explain? This film seems to me to be a film that is, on the one hand, trying to purport to be a sort of time capsule representation of Mexico, or this aspect of Mexico, during this particular time, 1970, 1971, so the early 1970s. And so we know from the interviews that director Crowson gives on the Criterion release, and also the cast and crew, we understand that this is meant to be a depiction that is accurate down to the very detail of the clothes that are being worn, certain expressions of language that are being made, the sounds that are heard in the background, and the like. And so, and certain shots of the city that we see depicted as the characters roam in and out. And so I think this film is meant to be, in many ways, a sort of objective look at a particular moment in a real historical basis of a city, and a moment of time in history that is meant not to be, or I'm sorry, it's meant on the one hand to be a sort of objective, or a representation that purports to be an objective, realistic take of a particular moment in time on the one hand. And yet on the other hand, what's so fascinating about this presentation is that it's not presented in a way that is a guerrilla filmmaking style, cinema verite type of documentary or docudrama, but this is a heavily constructed film that is very layered in terms of computer graphic effects, and also in terms of post-sync sound and the like. And so this is a very heavily constructed film that is meant to purport a certain type of reality, or objective reality. So I hope you can see that there is an inherent paradoxical element to the way in which this film seems to exist, which I find very fascinating. And I think the performance by the great Yalitza Aparicio, I think, is also very emblematic of that. You know, how she is, on the one hand, not necessarily a professionally trained actor on the one hand, and yet at the same time she gives a performance that is a performance. And so there is this wonderful dynamic in terms of real and fiction, in terms of what is meant to be purporting to be real and what is also being constructed in order to support that reality. And so I think this overall dynamic is what makes this film Roma such a fascinating document and such an incredible work on a technical level. But you tie into that the emotional resonance that this film carries with it, and what you have is a film that really, really, really packs a wallop. And so I think this is a great film to have in the Criterion collection, and hopefully it's a film that will carry a lot of weight and that will not lose track of any of its own emotional resonance as the years pass. You know, this is a 2018 film, so only time will tell how this film will feel upon rewatch 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, who knows. But I mean, as far as the way the film seems to be operating now, and the way in which it is trying to depict a certain moment of history and time that is no longer existing in the now. This is a fascinating document, and I think the fact that it's dealing with history and time in that way might lead one to think that maybe there is an inherent sense of timelessness in the film itself. And so perhaps that might be a hint or an indication of its longevity as the years pass. And I think we might find our answer in that. But who knows? Time will only tell. But I think all indications are that this is a film that will have a great deal of longevity indeed. So this is the film Roma in a nutshell. But when we're talking about this film Roma as a physical media release, which in and of itself I think is quite a miracle, you combine with that the fact that this is released by the Criterion Collection, and oh gosh, what a splendid release this is. So first of all, this is purporting to be a 4K digital master of the film, and with Dolby Atmos soundtrack. And so this is quite evident because the picture quality is sublime and beautiful. The black and white picture quality is there, but all the contrasts and details and the sharpness is there, and the sounds are just so evident, and the way this is presented by the Criterion Collection really respects those aspects of the presentation very, very well, and preserves that viewing experience and listening experience very well. So there is that aspect. But the Criterion Collection release doesn't end there, my friends, because we have, by my count, 5 different supplements here. Different little documentaries. So the first is a documentary called Road to Roma. And this is a Netflix documentary. It's not a Criterion produced documentary, at least according to the credits. It's a Netflix produced documentary. And what this is it's in essence a almost 1 hour sort of interview with the director Crowson. And he is talking about the genesis of this film, what was his inspiration for this film, how he further specifically developed this film, and how he ended up making this film, and the philosophy behind making this film, how he wanted to have this film be supported by memory, his memories and his feelings and his sort of interactions with his own past, and how he wanted to try to capture that in a way that was that had an objective, realism quality about it. And the only way in his mind that he could really authentically achieve that is through a sort of a post-production process that involved computer graphics and editing and blue screening and the creation of a very detailed sound palette that relies a lot on Foley, and also on the creation or generation of sound effects, etc. So it's a lot of film magic that is being employed to create this sense of a realistic, objective presentation of a memory captured on film, I think. And the Netflix documentary Road to Roma, which is in essence an extended interview with Crowson, I think really brings this to our attentions most vividly. And so this is a great interview to have on the Criterion Collection release, and it's really great. It's a Netflix documentary, so I'm not sure, I'm not a Netflix expert. One can assume, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I can assume that this probably was available to watch on Netflix through some capacity. Maybe it's still available now to watch on Netflix, who knows. But in any event, this documentary Road to Roma is included on the Criterion Collection Blu-ray of this film. The second documentary is called Snapshots from the Set. And this is, according to the credits, it seems to be the first of many Criterion-produced supplements. And this is really wonderful for a number of reasons. It has shots from the film as it was being made. It also has snippets of interviews or discussions made by the producers, Gabriela Rodriguez, Nicolas Celis. Also, we have the stars of the film, talking about this. We also have Eugenio Caballero, who's the production designer, who's very important as far as this film is concerned. Casting director Luis Rosales, executive producer David Linde, and this is essentially the making of the film, but from the cast and crew perspective. So if we had the first documentary called The Road to Roma, which is in essence the making of the film from Cuarón's perspective, then we have this documentary Snapshots from the Set, which is essentially the cast and crew's perspective on the making of the film and how they are trying to conform with or satisfy the instructions of Cuarón, which in some instances were very exact, very specific and detailed, and he was very demanding. But I think everyone seems to exude the sense of trying to achieve a sense of greatness, and I think it's undeniable that they really did achieve something that was truly great and remarkable in the final product that is Roma. But this is a great sort of complementary documentary to The Road to Roma. So The Road to Roma and Snapshots from the Set are sort of two sides of the same coin, as it were. The making of the film just from different perspectives. Cuarón on the one hand and the cast and crew on the other. So really a great documentary to watch. So I would strongly recommend it. Then there are a couple other documentaries, shorter documentaries on the post-production process. And so you can, the two documentaries on the post-production process are called The Look of Roma and The Sound of Roma. And so the Look of Roma is talking about the way in which the actual visual style was determined and executed, how this visual style helped to augment or capture or depict certain qualities of this historical setting of Roma, and how the camera, how certain camera cinematic tricks were employed in order to best achieve this historically accurate look that the film was achieving or trying to achieve, and the kinds of computer tools that were needed or that were employed in order to achieve this look. It was what I was trying to refer to earlier in this video, which is the beautifully paradoxical nature of this film as being being a way to try to depict reality on the one hand, but doing so in a way that is very heavily manufactured on the other. And I think that there's such a lovely synthesis of thought and ideas with this in terms of capturing the look of Roma. And so this documentary here, it's really wonderful. I should say it features Carlos Morales, production supervisor, Adam Gall, who's the editor, and Stephen J. Scott, a finishing artist, talking about specific aspects of the visual look of this film. So that's The Look of Roma. And then there's The Sound of Roma, which is talking about the soundscape of this film. You know, one of the very key aspects of this film is the sounds that are being captured. And what is very evident from watching these supplements and from watching the film itself is that it seems like Cuarón was trying to strive for and trying to achieve a certain soundscape that was detailed to the very singular voice, that was layered in a way that was meant to give us the authentic illusion of reality, at least how it was heard on the streets during these days of 70-71. And so to watch this supplement called The Sound of Roma really gives us a real sense of just the exacting nature of the work that went into creating the final soundscape of Roma. A great documentary. Skip Livesey and Craig Hennigan and Sergio Diaz are talking about specific aspects of this. And in particular, I think there's a discussion of this idea of walla and the idea of background chatter, of background characters talking, and this idea of how Cuarón was not satisfied with just having random sounds to imitate the sense of people talking, but he actually wanted to have background noise of actual conversations of people. It wouldn't necessarily be heard on the forefront of the soundtrack of the film, but we would get a sense of something in the background. So there had to be a little separate worlds that would be created, and based on the creation of those worlds, then these conversations would be recorded, and these sorts of things would happen. This is an example of the kind of detail that went behind these. And another detail that's great about this is, Crowson was really insistent on a specific type of plane that was flying overhead in the sky. It had nothing to do directly with the story itself, but this sort of detail was very, very important to him in order, as a means of laying down a further aspect of the overall foundation that was meant, as I say, to further this idea of the film as being a sort of a visual and oral experience of a kind of reality of a historical time that is no longer here. So this is a great documentary, The Sound of Roma. Please check it out if you have the opportunity. And then finally, there is a documentary about the theatrical campaign and the social impact of this film, Roma. And again, the producers are being interviewed here, talking about the philosophy behind its release, how this would be released, the idea of Netflix coming into the picture, but also the importance that was placed early on in having this film, at least in some degree anyway, be shown in theaters, so it would be a sort of theatrical experience, and also how this film seems to have touched a certain aspect of the sort of national consciousness, if you will, and also not only its national appeal, but also its international appeal as well, because this film has undoubtedly a strong international appeal that spans, that crosses borders without a doubt. So a wonderful ending documentary that caps off this whole journey of the production process of Roma really beautifully. But that's not all, my friends, because we then have the actual presentation itself, which is in this lovely thick digipack presentation, really great here, and it has lovely cover art, which is how should I put it? It's a significant part, or it's significant in the context of the film. Let me put it that way. A very lovely depiction here. But we open out, or take out the booklet, or the inside, and we can see the outer shell. And I love the detail of how there's actually picture art inside the outer shell here. It's not so visible immediately, but the fact that it's there, I think it's really great. It's another example of how Criterion does digipack packaging really well. And then we have the inside portion here, and when we open it up, we have the single disc for the Blu-ray, but then we have the cover art, which is actually more scenes of the film, and then we have this, which is the thick booklet, bound booklet, which has beautiful pictures and sort of stills from the film, which you have to check this out if you haven't. Check it out live, because these pictures are such high quality, so beautiful. What I love in particular is the booklet does this. It has fold out pictures on some of the pages, so you can actually see fold out pages that are on the front and the back of these fold out pages here, and they occur every so often throughout the booklet itself. And this is really wonderful. It reminds me a lot of how Criterion used to do its Laserdiscs, and how the Laserdiscs opened up sometimes doubly or sometimes even triply, and you can see picture layouts in there. Well, this sort of picture fold out within the book itself is sort of visually reminiscent of that Criterion Laserdisc presentation way back in the day. I really like it. Not to mention, of course, that we're getting high quality pictures that are really great. But I should mention also that we are getting for the Blu-ray release some great essays. So the first essay that we get is by Valeria Luiselli, which is called Roma, or the Art of Making Ruins. And this is a very good essay because she is talking about the city and the sort of environment or environs and the landscape and the importance of the landscape. And I think this discussion is very key when talking about watching this film and the detail of the architecture and the living, breathing aspect of the city and the city landscape, and how this is such an important dynamic to the film and to anyone who has lived in this particular part of the world. I haven't, but my sense from reading this essay is that this sort of understanding or appreciation of this is one of the things that makes this film stand out so remarkably. And so to have this essay, I think, is very helpful, especially for someone like myself who, as I say, doesn't have the direct experience of living in this area. So really very helpful. And then there's another essay called The Layers of Roma by Enrique Krauze. And this is a nice take on the film from a historical perspective, talking about it from the details of history that the film is trying to depict, and also giving us a very general overview as to the historical background in terms of Mexico and President Luis Echeverria Alvarez, and how this history is very significant, not only in terms of what the film is trying to capture in terms of its character, the cinematic character, but also what the film is actually indeed depicting in specific key moments of the film. And so the Krauze essay is very good as a kind of means of providing some background information, if anything, historical information about the history of this of the nation, that I think is very key in really having a further appreciation of why this film has such a deep resonance that it does, historically speaking anyway. So this is the Krauze essay. And then there is an essay, or it's kind of an essay, called 6 Ways to Roma by Aurelio Asiain. And this is actually a series of tweets that are published here. And it's essentially Asiain's reaction to the film in general terms, but also in very specific terms in some places. And he's responding almost in real time to certain parts of the film and how it affects him personally, and also how he seems to be really affected by specific details of a certain sound here, or what Cleo does there, or what this particular thing means to him, etc. This is a fascinating document, reading this sort of threads of tweets. And so this is Asian's general take on this. And so to get this kind of perspective, I think, is great, because it also provides us with a way in which we can appreciate this film by seeing how this film is being appreciated by Asiain, if you know what I mean. So this is a really great thing to have in this Criterion booklet. So this is 6 Ways to Roma. And then we also have an essay called Building Roma by Eugenio Caballero, who is the production designer. And he's going into specifics about specific locations or not location, but specific places in the film, and the details and the work that went into trying to recreate those places in terms of locations, in terms of set dressing, in terms of post-production, etc. And he goes into details of specific places that were used and specific things that were done in order to achieve, and using there's picture references that are provided as well, that gives us a nice perspective as to how this film was indeed trying to accurately capture places in the past that no longer exist. And so to read this this work or this writing by Caballero is really another indication of just how much work went into trying to recreate the historical accuracy of this. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful, engaging read. And so I really recommend it. And it comes with, as I say, in the booklet for this Blu-ray. Really well done. And then the booklet rounds out with discussion about the presentation itself. So this is the Criterion release of Roma. And as I say, it is one of the best releases from the Criterion collection so far. It is a remarkable release of a remarkable film. And it's, I think, very remarkable for a number of reasons which I've tried to highlight here in this video. But ultimately, my friends, this is a presentation of a very powerful and emotionally moving work that I think is the fact that it's a historical, or it purports to be a representation of a historical past, I think is an indication of how well it will last going forward in time. So this is spy number 1014. The film is Roma from 2018, Alfonso Cuarón. So my friends, that's it for now. So what do you think of this film? Do you like this film? Do you not like this film? In any event, my friends, I would love to hear your thoughts and comments about this really remarkable achievement called Roma. So if you want, you can leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section below, and it will be my pleasure to hear what it is you have to say. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. So until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. So until we meet again, my friends, thank you and cheers.